Invisible Time Sports, Modern Warriors, Flying Football Players and Triumph. Marc writes, a slight departure from my unseen collection this week as it features two sportsmen with incredible life stories. The first is the boxer, Bilal Fawaz. The kid from a tough background is a stereotypical boxing story. Yet as Bilal made his professional debut, he was also fighting for his life and against deportation. The Nigerian-born boxer was abused as a child, and when his mother died he was sent to London aged only 14 to meet his estranged Lebanese father. It then became apparent that the young Bilal had been trafficked into the UK and was imprisoned in a house. He was banned from attending school, but managed to escape aged 19. He lived in a hostel for abused and abandoned children for 4 years, and in that time took up boxing, becoming national light middleweight champion in 2012. After his 18th birthday, Fawaz faced another battle with the Home Office to claim residency in the UK, but he failed to do so because his birth had not been registered in the country. He was even considered for the Great Britain Olympic team before the London 2012 and Rio 2016 games, but was unable to join because he had no passport. I met Bilal, now 33, and carefully tried to illustrate his incredible story, a story in which life transcends sport. On Sunday, I photographed the return of the footballer Christian Eriksen, and I wanted to show him as tiny figure, dwarfed by a huge stadium, when his life transcends all sport. Marc writes, I had already read Rick Broadbent's piece, and had discussed Bilal's quite extraordinary story long before we met in a modern gym in Mayfair, London. I set up a series of lights and reflectors, which caused long shadows to fall across the blank canvas of an empty wall space, and placed boxing gloves on the floor, then asked Bilal to simply sit and look upward. This was exactly how a picture can tell the story, as it conveys Bilal as if waiting in a detention center room for his future and fate to be decided as he looks upwards into the light. I was absolutely convinced this would be the image which would be used to accompany Rick's feature. Marc writes, Meeting Bilal had a profound effect on me, and I wanted to continue to share his story. Late on Friday night he made his professional debut at York Hall in Bethnal Green, East London. York Hall was opened in 1929 by the Duke and Duchess of York, from whom it takes its name, and is considered by many to be the home of British boxing. Its earthy, no-frills reputation has been sealed by the blood of countless boxing legends. The former world heavyweight champion Lennox Lewis fought Noel Quarles in 1990, and in 1995 Joe Calzaghe took down Frank Minton in an unbelievable 85 seconds. I thought about these great boxers and wondered, as I watched Bilal having his hands taped by his cornerman, if they too, the likes of David Haye, Carl Froch and Nigel Benn, had also sat nervously in the tiny basement changing room. Marc writes, in his Spartan dressing room Bilal pulls on his shorts after the long and careful process of taping his hand. By using a mirrorless camera which has a silent shutter feature, I was able to be unheard and almost unseen. The tension in the room was palpable, so I was keen not to chat or even make eye contact with Bilal as he went through his preparation. Marc writes, as his tunes belted out of his tiny speaker, Bilal began a series of warm-up exercises using a skipping rope, and then a sparring session of ferociously fast jab. He was wearing his ring walk uniform, and moments later a referee knocked on his door to say that it was fight time. Before he left the room, Bilal proceeded to clean away the plastic bags, hand tape and his personal belongings. As I followed him up the narrow stairs, I wondered if Lennox, Calzaghe, Haye, Froch and Benn had done the same. Marc writes, fighting out of Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, Russia, Vladimir Fleischhauer and Bilal were fourth on the bill on Friday night. I knew that I did not want to take my allotted position ringside, as this would be pointless, because I wanted to show Bilal's debut at York Hall. With a capacity of 1,200 in the main theatre, it also has a 280-seater balcony that looks directly over the ring, like a kind of unpretentious cockney amphitheatre. Marc writes, I squeezed onto a spare seat on the balcony before the start of the fight and made friends with a lovely cockney lady sitting next to me. She told me she had been coming to York Hall for years, and her elderly father was sitting just along the row wearing his West Ham United shirt. Her son and his mates were still in the bar, and she was getting cross that he hadn't delivered her vodka and coke. She insisted on me calling her Mum, and was very knowledgeable about boxing, so much so that as soon as Vladimir entered the ring, she grabbed my arm, shaking it, saying, just look at them shoes he is wearing, our Amelia wears them at the beach. Marc writes, I quickly moved positions around the balcony between rounds, and I had just trained my lens as the third round started, when Bilal unleashed a fierce combination of punches. The noise levels in the hall matched his unrelenting barrage, and here Vladimir receives a crunching right hand which knocked him back against the rope. Marc writes, after 1 minute 41 seconds the referee stepped between the boxers, ending the fight in round 3 by way of technical knockout. Bilal walks back to his corner as a dazed Vladimir is ushered to his. The crowd were cheering loudly as they appreciated the boxing masterclass by Bilal in his first professional fight. Marc writes immediately after the fight, Bilal gave an interview for TV, and I particularly like his sweat-covered face showing no signs of his night's work in the ring. I am sure my lens will be trained on Bilal again in the future as he now embarks on a new chapter of his life, hoping of course the Home Office will permit this. Marc writes again another frame which I thought would tell the whole story, rather than the obvious tight stock shot of a player clapping the crowd, and it is my favorite of my week. Here Christian Eriksen walks out to rapturous applause at Brentford Community Stadium as he is able to resume his career with the London club after suffering a cardiac arrest while playing for Denmark at Euro 2020 last summer. The 30-year-old was released by Inter Milan after being fitted with an implanted cardioverter defibrillator. I am so thankful to Brentford that they allowed Christian to walk onto the pitch on his own, without TV crews, a sound man, a focus puller and club photographer in tow, as this frame shows a footballer returning to football. Bradley writes, I loved photographing the Taekwondo athlete Latalo Muhammad as he prepares for the upcoming European Championship. It's fantastic that we are beginning to see people face to face again, and are able to do these features after the past 2 years of Zoom interviews. Bradley writes, I really wouldn't fancy being this close if it was for real. Latalo was a joy to work with and very generous with his time, but he is also lightning quick, and it took me a few tries to get my timing right on the jumping pig. Bradley writes, Hoda the slaughter stuck in the gutter. Another new one on me. The Liverpool striker Diogo Jota got trapped in the gap between the advertising boards and concrete gutter and couldn't get out. Eventually the physio came over and he had to take his foot out of his boot to escape. Bradley writes, it's been a couple of years since I saw this fella, John Withington, a Burnley fan, with this season's face paint design. I have photographed John once each year with the new creations. I hope I'm going to be there next season for Premier League games, but I'm a bit doubtful given their present league position. Bradley writes, a flying Thiago Alcantara tries a spectacular effort in Liverpool's Premier League clash against Leicester City. Bradley writes, a bit of a flying athlete theme going on this week. Kasper Schmeichel, the Leicester goalkeeper, can only watch as an effort from the Liverpool striker Mohamed Salah comes back off the post. Bradley writes, the Manchester City manager, Pep Guardiola, gives Jack Grealish some instructions during their clash with Brentford at the Etihad Stadium, Manchester. Bradley writes, the Liverpool fullback Trent Alexander-Arnold in action at Turf Moor in their match against Burnley. It's strange how things work out. I hadn't been to Burnley all season, then was there twice in 5 days. The weather was poor both times, but the pies were great.